Well, now so far we've seen lots of ways to be able to manipulate and animate our elements using CSS3. But we can also do this using HTML5, the canvas element, and some JavaScript. So I'd like to go through some examples to show you how that works. Let me close up the file we've been working on, and we'll open up our next file, number 4, Try Canvas Transforms. Let's open that up in the browser, and open it up in our TextEdit application, and take a look at what we have. If we take a look in the program, here we've got two canvases side by side. If we take a look at the code, our first canvas has an ID of original, and our second has an ID of transformed. We have some minimal styles up here just so we can see the extents of the canvas and so we can have them sitting next to each other. And the drawing for our script is already done down at the bottom. So let's take a look at that. Here I've got a variable for our canvas, picking up the original canvas and assigning a context to it. I set a fill style of red, and then I'm actually using a command we haven't seen before. It directly fills a rectangle without having to draw it and then fill it afterwards. But it works just like the rectangle command. I've set up the rectangle right in the middle of the canvas using a start value of 50 and 50 for the XY and a width and height of 200. Now notice down below what I've done is created a second canvas variable and a second context and done the same thing with it. Here we're just looking for the transformed canvas instead of the original canvas. Our canvas has pretty much the same transforms that we saw in CSS3. The only difference is we're applying it with JavaScript this time, and we're generally going to be applying it to canvas elements themselves. Being able to do transformations can come in really handy when drawing your elements. For instance, let's take a look at the element that we've got drawn here. We've drawn a square right in the center of our canvas by placing it at very specific start positions and setting up its width and height. If we were to change the width and height, we would also have to change the position of the element as well, since that'll get all messed up. So let's take a look at using transformations to be able to draw in one place and then move the object to where you want it to be. What I'm going to do is draw in a convenient place where I'm going to set up my object centered on the top left corner of the canvas. And we'll be working on the second canvas here, the trans canvas. The first thing I want to do is redraw the rectangle. Now I'm going to draw the same thing, a 200 pixel square, but I'm going to draw it centered around the top left corner of the canvas. So what I'll need to do is set the X value for the starting position at minus half of whatever the width is, which is 100. And I'll do the same thing for the Y value. And let me point over here. If this is the 0, 0 position of my second canvas, then minus 100 would be over here, and minus 100Y, then minus 100X would be over this way, and minus 100Y would be up on the screen this way. Let's take a look at what we've drawn. I'll save the changes. We'll refresh our page, and you can see that the square looks smaller, but that's because the rest of it's cut off, and the square is actually centered right up here on the 0, 0 coordinate. Now let's try out our new transform function. I'll go back over to our document, and I'm just going to add something in here before we actually draw the object. I'll use my context variable, transContext, just like all the other elements that we work with. And this time I'm going to use the translate function. For this function, we need to specify values for the X and Y movement that we want to achieve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the middle of the document by moving it 150 pixels in the X direction and another 150 pixels in the Y direction. Let's save our change. And now when I refresh the page, we can see that our square is drawn back in the middle of the canvas. But now, if I change the width or height, I don't have to change the position. All I have to do is change the rectangle here. So let's try it. I'm going to make it 100 pixels wide instead of 200. And that means we should start it at minus 50 instead of minus 100. We'll save our change, go back to our document, and refresh the page. And you can see that my square is half the width now, but it's still centered on the page. We didn't have to change the position. Now, of course, we can use the other functions as well to get different transformations. For instance, I could continue on by rotating this. I'll just add in another trans context, and this time I'll call the rotate function. Now, the only thing different here is our rotations need to be given in radian values instead of degrees. So if I want to rotate my square 45 degrees, I would just multiply that by math pi. Remember, pi is capital, and then divide by 180 degrees. I'll save our change, and when we refresh the page, we'll see a rotated square here as well. Just for fun, let's try a scale. Transcontext, and of course the scale function this time. With our scale function, we can give separate values for the x and y scales. So I'll set the x scale to 0.5 and the y scale to 1, so it'll stay the same. Let's save that change, and this time when we refresh the page, we can see that our square has been scaled again in x direction and not in the y direction.